All right, hello, and welcome to the Decipher AI podcast. Today we are joined by Shav and Rod. Luckily, Rod is a professor at the Mexico's Thomas Institute of Technology, lecturing on building AI products, and he's also the host of the Max and Rod Show. It's a podcast on the latest news in artificial intelligence. He's also the founder of the AI product engineering community, which is an absolutely great resource for any AI engineers trying to learn about the latest updates in the space, as well as get some resources on what skills to learn in order to become AI engineers. And finally, Rod also has several years' experience in industrial data science with several years of machine learning engineering. So he's absolutely the perfect person to talk to in order to learn how to build AI products. So welcome, Rod.
Thank you for having me.
Right. So Rod, your at the moment your specialty is teaching people about this new role called the AI product engineer. I think it'd be brilliant to start off with that and just get a pretty quick introduction as to what you think that is. What is an AI product engineer?
So we have to take a step back and then just understand where we are at the moment. We're in this age where we have all these generative AI models that are pre-trained, meaning they're already available online as an API, or you can download it from the internet, and you can just query it as if it were just an API. So you can put a GET request, a POST request, and so on. And as a result, this changed completely how people who are building machine learning models have to work with artificial intelligence. Historically, it was so that you will collect data, you will clean it, you will test multiple algorithms. Anyone who has taken a machine learning class can attest that you will learn more than 20 algorithms that are of different nature. You will find out which one works best for your problem, and then this is the one that you will be using it. But as a result, this will be really completely tailored into your problem and your company and your situation. You could not, let's say, you're working at a bank A, take this model and bring it to bank B, because it will be completely different data, completely different situation, and so on. It will not be portable. Now, generative AI, with the rise of large language models, this completely changed, and what works for bank A can be translated to bank B. And this also means that how we work with this technology is also different. And therefore, it needs to be a different way how we learn it, how we interact with, and also which profession is used for this. Not anymore data science, not anymore machine learning, but something new.
And what goes into the name of AI product engineer? Because when I think of AI product engineer, it's someone who's a deep understanding of the user design and the user experience, as well as artificial intelligence. What skill sets go into this new role?
Yes, absolutely. So it is so that historically, anyone who was working with machine learning, with data science, it was more of a central function. The person will be reporting maybe to a VP data, maybe to someone who is not on a user-facing role, but rather it will be an administrative, maybe it's also like a central function, meaning in practice that, for example, if I'm doing, let's say, like a recommender system, that I will recommend if you should buy red shoes or green shoes. What will happen was that I will pretty much prepare, I will train my algorithm, maybe like overnight, and then on the next day, I will have, let's say, like the set of weights and how my model will react. That will be, let's say, in some CSV file, in some XML file, whatever format it is, JSON. And how this is used in practice by users, how this is integrated into the actual website, let's say like an e-commerce website, I will not see it at all. This will not be any more of my purview. And also, in fact, even if my algorithm is used or not, this will also be secondary. But now with large language models, with AI and so on, this is also different, where really everything that I'm doing impacts the user experience, and I also need the input from these users in order to have a better product. And this is also the idea with being an AI product engineer, is that on one side, I'm no longer in a central function. I do not report to VP data, for example, but instead I am in an engineering team, maybe working very closely with the front-end designers, because also front-end user interface becomes super essential in how we interact with these products. Should be like a chat interface, should be something more constrained. How do we handle user input and so on and so forth? All this needs to be into this, and therefore the person needs to, on one side, understand not only how to work with these systems, but also understand how the users themselves will be working it and getting this feedback in order to improve the product.
Nice. So from what I'm understanding, at least, correct me if I'm wrong. You're saying the AI product engineer works a bit more end to end, and yeah, go on. Sorry.
One parallel I see a lot, and I was discussing it with a few people in the last weeks, was We can think of the beginnings of the internet, like in the early 90s and so on. There was the idea of the webmaster. And back then, there was no really distinction between like front end, back end, DevOps, SysOps, and so on. It was, let's say, just one person who was responsible for, let's say, from checking the email that will arrive to the website to so modifying the website and both in the front end and the back end. So it was like a little bit of a jack of all trades in a sense. And right now we're in this age in AI where really we need generalists who are able to do a little bit of everything. And as slowly we're figuring out what works, what is not working, but it's still very, very early. And therefore it's necessary to like really understand a bit of everything.
Okay. So yeah, my next question for you that comes straight off that is, I'm a big fan of open source, or at least open weight models. If you do have an AI product engineer trying to implement something along those lines, they also have to be very well versed in MLOps, which now expands the skill set quite a bit. So how would you sort of weigh up that issue?
Deploying open source models is something where it is indeed in that more non-trivial. So it requires a lot of knowledge in, yeah, so from any type of platform and so on. Indeed, is here something where on one side, we're still at the stage where most of what is happening in the AI space is on a proof of concept, prototype, and so on. So there are some companies that are really doing things in production, but it's still limited. So the need of really knowing, okay, they need to scale for millions of users and so on. We are not there yet as a profession, as a community. It's much more now of like hackers and thinkers that we should build things quick, fast, see if it works with a few users, and later we figure it out. So as a result, at the moment, most AI systems are so to say like tape glued, where there will be not really a enterprise platform that's being used, but rather so some scripts, maybe like some fast API little application here and there. And then with this is like the application itself. So it's still in a sense rudimentary. But it's changing as well. So the open source community is doing like a lot of things in order to have ways how to deploy this model in production. For example, just now, last week, NVIDIA announced this platform called NVIDIA NIM. The idea behind NVIDIA NIM is a little bit of that of on one side, I download models from the internet. And not only that, but also I have these models already optimized for this platform. And I have easy ways how to deploy them both locally, for example, in my laptop or desktop, if I have NVIDIA so hardware, as well as in a data center in the cloud.
Sure. Okay, so my understanding here, the AI product engineer is a generalist. He has an understanding of how the AI model is interfacing with the user, but as well as deploying the model and training the model. So he obviously is a very skilled individual. My question is, what is the benefit here to have an AI engineer who's such a generalist as opposed to an interdisciplinary team that really does kind of map out that entire landscape anyway?
Well, AI engineers, cyber engineers, for the most part, they will not, let's say, do anything related to improving the model itself. So the topic, for example, of building a model from scratch doesn't really happen in large language models unless one works for Google, NVIDIA, Meta, and so on. So like really these massive organizations. Everyone else is pretty much downloading a public model or using OpenAI GPT, and they needs to build a product around that. So also in the type of profiles who are becoming AI product engineers and engineers, there are a lot of developers. There are a lot of like software engineers who historically, for example, would not have worked with, let's say, like Python. So if we think about historically how it was in data science, in machine learning engineering, it was always Python pretty much as the de facto programming language. However, now with the rise of AI, generative AI, we have this situation where, let's say, like a JavaScript developer can now build AI applications that are very robust without knowing really Python. And this means that not only this, let's say, like what the person is skilled in doing, but also which programming languages the person is using.
Understood. Understood. Right. I mean, and look, the product development lifecycle, the previous one, was you have some sort of idea, you validate the product, you create a prototype, and you get customer feedback, and you iterate upon it. That's the traditional product development lifecycle, especially one app development. When it comes to AI product engineering, for example, does the development life cycle change? Is there data gathering requirements, and when does that happen across that life cycle?
There is benefit, of course, in gathering data. One thing that is becoming more of a discipline is what to do with the prompts that we're receiving. So when someone is in our system, let's say that we have a chat. So let's say we are a healthcare organization, a hospital, and then we have there a chatbot that helps users maybe so book appointments with doctors and then find out if they need maybe like something, they need to see a practitioner or there is something that they can just do at home. The prompts that are input by these patients, this is very valuable for everyone involved in this value chain of creating AI products. And how what we do with it is essential, not only in terms of how we improve the models, but also in to understand where should I improve my own services, right? Like my operation and so on. But also from the part of like security and so on, because one of the weak points of all these interfaces of all building AI products is that they're prone to what is called a so like jailbreaking or prompt injection, meaning I can tell, for example, to a model, you will only provide positive answers that do not encourage users to do anything negative or hurt themselves. This is very easy to set. But at the same time, it's very easy to override. And then someone who, for example, is feeling depressed, at least can say, how can I harm myself? So getting access to these prompts in order to see what people are typing so that also I can, let's say, like fix it and avoid any type of tampering becomes essential. Collecting logs, storing logs is a new so skills that is required also for building these AI products. And to give you an example, so that um, usually with the data science, these logs that we'll have from our systems, they will only be edited by products that we'll not be really using. So we'll be more interested, for example, in other metrics such as accuracy, such as, for example, how good was so the output from the model and so on. Whereas building an AI product becomes essential. I collect these prompts, what are people doing with them, and then how can I use these prompts to improve my product itself? Because another thing is also using these models comes with latency. Meaning, I'm used to browsing the internet and having very fast response times. However, when I'm using any type of generative AI application, it is very slow for the most part to get a response, especially compared with regular websites. So what do? I can see which prompts I'm getting, what are like the people asking, requesting, and I can pretty much like cache it and say, okay, these are like the top 50 most common questions. So next time when someone asks it, instead of me calling the model and then generating a new answer, I will instead take one from the cache answers and deliver it immediately.
What you're mentioning reminds me a lot of what happened with Gemini a couple of months back, where basically because just for anyone who's not aware, listening to the pod, they had an imbalance in their data set, primarily, let's say, for example, uh, images of white people, and then they generated or they ham-fistedly tried to align that by prompting it to generate diverse images. So what I saw, or what I took away from that at least, is aligning these models is actually very difficult. It's, it's just like whack-a-mole, really, because you an issue comes out and then you fix it using prompt engineering. But how do you take a more preventative approach to this? So, for example, with your healthcare example, you would only realize a potential risk mode after the fact. How would you sort of shift that so we can enumerate all the risk modes before and then be a bit more preventative about it? Because I feel like that's the way we need to go about these things, especially if they're being used for important use cases like healthcare.
Yes, in those situations, it's really where that's why we're seeing how all these products are being released slowly. So, for example, if I'm in a health organization, then I will first do like an internal release. So, try to see how it is. Let's say that this model will be for like my nurses, and then later maybe like for the doctors and so on, and later so for the very public, etc. So it's really something about first so exposing it to a smaller subset of users, but also as you were so mentioning with this situation happening in Gemini, it comes down also to making it, the model opinionated, to making the product opinionated, and potentially this might have as a repercussion that some users might not be satisfied with the results. In the case of Google, so it was a little bit of so trying to be too opinionated on the type of so results that they will appear, and then they will saying okay, we'll try to be respectful of diversity and so on. But then it became a historical where there were all these prompts and results of people asking, give me a picture of the founding fathers, and then it will be a generated image where all the founding fathers were people of color, where historically that was not the case. So there's always here a balance of, on one side, trying to restrict the model to behave the way you want, but also having into account that potentially the output that will generate might be not satisfactory for some of your users.
Okay, well, I think the natural question that comes out of that is this centralization of power that we're sort of seeing in the landscape right now. Everyone basically just uses OpenAI, maybe Gemini, but this allows these large organizations to engineer, like you said, the bias that they want into these models. So, what is the best way as builders for us to go around that?
Well, the benefit is that open models, local models, so let's say Mistral, Meta, Llama, and so on, they are getting better and better. So to the point that for many use cases, I do not need anymore to go and use an API from OpenAI, so also Anthropic or any other provider, but I can pretty much host this model locally, and I can also, for example, fine tune it to my needs. Fine tuning is still a bit of a discipline that is more of alchemy. At the moment, it's getting better and better, but still is something where, let's say, the majority is not in a position of doing it because it requires too many things to know, significant knowledge in advance and so on, a lot of like feeding around. But nevertheless, this is the way to go. In, for example, I get my Llama model. With this Llama model, I incorporate my company data and so on. I fine tune it. And then on top of that, I use other techniques such as retrieval augmented generation, so like RAG applications and so on, RAG architectures. And with this, I can pretty much, or once I have this trade-off of getting a very robust model, but also that is tailored for my use case and giving results that I am so happy in providing them.
Okay, so without fine tuning, I understand how it can significantly increase the performance of your system in a specific use case. But how would you go about gathering the data and generating the evaluation metrics required to do so? Because you have an idea in place that maybe this model, this generalist model of OpenAI, is not good enough to perform this task. What evaluation metrics are you creating that would improve in light of fine tuning?
The nice thing about fine tuning is that actually I do not need that much data in order to fine tune a model. So really, if I have access to, let's say, like 10,000 documents, something around this ballpark, I can very easily fine tune a model. So much more than the amount of data, it is of course the quality of the data. So here comes indeed like so we go back a little bit like full circle of what is discipline of a data scientist or machine learning engineer is being able to collect data, clean it, and prepare it. And then when it comes to fine tuning, yes, indeed, it comes to getting data, preparing it, and making it usable for the model that we'll be using.
Okay, and now we go to data quality, which is a very interesting one because the latest Llama model that came out, Model 3, had a huge performance increase due to its data quality, like data quality mining techniques. Do you mind touching on data quality, like the importance of doing so, what kind of techniques we can implement?
Yes, so I would say in general, so for any type of work with data, be so here large language models such as data science, so working here with the quality of data is paramount pretty much. And here is pretty much two ways how this can be, so let's say structured. On one side is the human, some evaluated where I can have a set of reviewers who are scoring and saying, okay, how good is, let's say, like this prompt, so how good is this document so for for a respective use case. It can be, let's say, just with very simple happy face, not happy face, or some sort of scala. But it can also be generated by other models. So where if I do not have enough data in my organization, if I do not have people available, so for doing these type of activities, I cannot pay them or I cannot find them, then what I can do is I can have models generating data that can be relevant. So for example, let's say like medical data or any type of other documents I need for my use case. And then having other models that are benchmarking, that are acting as judges for these responses, and then saying how good is and so on. And then there's of course a hybrid approaches where if I have this infrastructure and so on, I can have, let's say, generated data by a model that is judged by the model, and then still there's a human involved in the loop.
Well, practically speaking, how would that look like? So let's say you want to create a tweet generator robot, right? Tweet generator AI client. How would it look like to filter out data which is irrelevant to your AI application? Would you tell one model, okay, listen, I'm going to give you a bunch of data, go through it. Well, not one model. I'm going to filter through some data, get rid of tweets that aren't really engaging. If you want to create an engaging tweet engine, for example, how would that look like?
Yes, so likely there you will set the temperature so high, you will say I want some creativity in my answers, but as a result also there will be quite some answers that are irrelevant, so they are no longer tweets, that are something else, or for example, that do not abide to tweet rules. So with tweets we have a limit of number of characters. Also, for example, there are things that you may not want to do, for example, such as tagging in the beginning is someone because then it becomes more like a direct message instead of a tweet and so on. So there are constraints in how a tweet should look in order to be a tweet. And I do not have any guarantees when I ask in my model, please generate us those tweets, that I will get exactly that. I will get something else that I do not meet those results. So here I can start by, for example, just having hard-coded rules or just regular expressions and so on. Filter this out and say, okay, this is too long, then I immediately discard it. But I can also give it to another model, because normally also what happens is that for the generation of data, I might want to use more cheaper models, let's say not the top of the line models that are available on the market, but smaller models or cheaper models that are generating this data. And then the judge might be a more expensive model. So let's say I will be using GPT-4 Turbo, so for judging, and then I will use GPT 3.5 for generating this data. Or I will use this local model, like a fee model, or just like a small meta llama, and then having a GPT being the judge. So they generate the tweets. I have them just saying, is this a tweet? And also, you can say, for example, you were saying, is this a tweet that will be engaging? And based on this, I can say, give me a let's say like a score from 1 to 10, how engaging will it be, and so on. And once we have this, then we can have also filters to say, I will only keep those tweets that are on one side, actual tweets, and also that have an engaging score of 8 or more.
Okay, I mean, and another thing that I'm seeing in the space, right, is this is a debate that Shab and I were having about product differentiation, right? We were debating if your model and your product, for example, is using the same foundation model, how do you go about differentiating your product from the rest of the competition, right? If everyone's using OpenAI, what techniques do you have at disposal to differentiate your product? Is it in the UX design? Is it in the prompt engineering? Is it in the data quality or the RAG system behind it? How would you go about that?
Yes, you see it all the time in Hacker News, similar sources, the so-called team wrapper. So for GPT, OpenAI models, and so on. And the idea behind it is that in the end, the value is in the model itself, and then I just have like a thin layer for my user interface, and that's pretty much it. But then as a result, I am exposed to any type of changes that on one side the platform have, as well as new features that comes out. So for example, at the beginning, or still until the beginning of the year, or until so last year, one popular use case, so for any type of some applications, companies were offering applications built on top of GPT, was something such as data analysis, having a data data processor where I would say like upload a CSV file or a PDF file, and I could ask questions of, please, so tell me, um, let us say, so from this table, what will be create a plot from this table, and so on. This will be a common use case. Or another common use case will be just to say, based on this image, create a CV portrait, so for me, and so on. This will be a popular application you will see on Twitter. And then all of a sudden, so OpenAI released the ability that I can generate my own GPTs, and then I can pretty much hard code this logic very easily. And not only that, but also the option to call functions, meaning to have this data and data analyst, so to say, in my ChatGPT OpenAI, not even the API itself, but already on ChatGPT service that anyone can use. And then therefore, many of these so products and services became irrelevant. However, what can we do in those cases? So once it comes down to just regular business building, it comes down to marketing and distribution. So in the end, if I have access to the users, if these users trust me, if I have built a brand around it, and this is a brand that people like, where there is some brand loyalty, then I can maybe like switch to something else. Maybe now I'm not offering, let's say, just a portrait for my CV generation, but I offer a full CV optimization or something like this. So I can swap people to something else, but I still have access to the users, and the users stay with me. Then is the topic of the product itself. So I can have a much better user experience. Usability comes down to that, because at the moment there is no really defined rules how an AI product should look like. Most people just default to having a chat interface, but chat interfaces for the most part are not the best option, because for most users, chats are just like having a text input for prompt is daunting. I do not know what I should be asking, how I should be formulating it. People are not yet used to that. They do not know how to request things. So then I can instead constrain this. I can, for example, have user interfaces that have drop downs, click here and there, and so on, where in the front end it looks structured, but in the back end, what's happening behind is really interaction just with an LLM, with any type of generative AI model. So there is also that. And then, of course, it is on so how I can add more complexity to the product itself on things that something like OpenAI and so on will likely not go into. For example, I can specialize myself into something. So if I go like deep down into the topic of healthcare, it's unlikely that OpenAI will be able to offer such a good healthcare product as the one that I'm using. So it's really that about finding your niche, but not only that, but also developing the brand and keeping the users.
I think what you're saying actually brings up two questions for me, actually. So, for me, one of the most differentiating things you can do with an LLM is actually providing your own proprietary actions. And as soon as you do that, you move into autonomous agents, which is something I want to get your opinion on, and seeing if another level on top of that, like a multi agent collaboration, if you've seen any commercial use case of that, which are actually done quite well. And the second thing that you mentioned that actually brought up a question to me is you mentioned that you have a user interface to make interacting with these LLMs a little bit easier. But if I'm playing devil's advocate, my reasoning or my argument to you would be that is only for now, as long as prompt engineering is still difficult. But as models get better, prompt engineering will get a lot easier. So will there still be a need to have this user interface above the LLMs instead of user just going straight to, let's say, ChatGPT? So those are my two questions for you. Interested to hear what you want.
Well, first on the question of so here prompt engineering and its usefulness, it is a discipline is evolving, because on one side, so the yes, it is becoming so that we now have models that can help us generate better prompts. So meaning we can think of a feature where even if the user inputs gibberish, there will be like a filter of another LM that will sort of like translate this into a meaningful prompt that will be used by their models. So there is that. But parallel to this, each time that we have a new model, new set of so rules and constraints appear of what is best practice for this model. And also, even between the model vendors themselves, there are best practices of how it works with one model versus the other. So, for example, something like Claude Anthropic, it works quite nicely with XML tags, whereas GPT prefers Markdown or a JSON as an input. So, therefore, there are like things to take into account depending on what one is using. Um, this one thing, maybe you can even encode it, and then the LM, this filter LM can take care of all that. But nevertheless, one still needs to a little bit know what one is doing. So even it's similar to, for example, when we go to a computer science class that it's like on compilers or pretty much any foundation of computer science. We might not never use it. We likely it's already been solved for the most part. We just download the necessary libraries and that's it. But still, we learn it because it is important to just understand how it works, especially if we need to fix it, if we need to like go inside and try to improve it. So there is that part. And then, so to the other part of, so here the user interface is all being constrained. Uh, Likely at some point it will happen, but we have also think, for example, let's say like with the Google search. It has taken pretty much, let's say like 2 decades so for users to become proficient in understanding how to do good searches with Google. But if we think just how people were searching, it's like 10 years ago. how they were writing their search queries. It was still very basic. So it will take quite some time for users to understand what are best practices, how can I maximize, so here an LLM. And as a result, there will still be many years of for us to figure out which prompts, which user interface we should be using. And this even thinking that this will be even text-based, because we can even think, will the future be something that is, let's say, audio-based? You're seeing, for example, these smart assistants are coming out, like Rabbit and so on, where the idea is similar to the movie Hair. So where I will just give an instruction with my voice, and then it will happen, it will trigger activities and so on. So it can be that in the end the future is not even like text based. It can be that it's completely so more physical. So where I'm interacting with my hands, and then my web camera is connected to a multimodal model and understands what I'm doing, and at the same time listening to what I'm saying. And with this, I can operate my whole user interface, my whole application, and so on. On the topic of agents, what is happening is that I think one of the most exciting spaces in so the whole generative AI space is still also very nascent, where agents for the most part is a little bit of they work until they don't, and for the most part very often they don't work. But we can think of what people are trying to do with this is for a lot of application generation. So what will happen if I completely remove the developer from the loop, and then I say I want, let's say, like a mobile app that will be able to so offer me a Flappy Bird game or something. I describe the prompt, and then the agents are able to generate code that can be compatible with iOS, and let me play a Flappy Bird. This in practice still has a lot of hurdles, but this is the way to go. So where really we can orchestrate very complex activities and then generate, for example, code that is really compatible and comparable to what a reasonable developer could generate.
I like that example you gave. It sounds very familiar. It sounds like, do you remember Chat Dev that came out, I think, last year, where they basically modeled out a gaming company, and each of the agents had their own particular role, and they were basically keeping each other in check, testing each other's code, etc. So, yeah, I do like the way that's going. I just wanted to pick up on one small thing that you said, where you said prompts act very differently depending on the model that you're going for, the way that OpenAI prefers Markdown, etc., etc. As a builder for myself, when I use LangChain, for example, um, LangChain works very well when you just use the OpenAI models. But as soon as I try and move to things locally, the prompts that they have in the backend don't work as well. So for me, as a developer, that's a limitation for me to move to more open source models. And it does keep me locked into OpenAI. So I just wanted to hear your comments on that, especially with my concerns with the centralization of power that's going on right now in the landscape.
I would say it's a bit of a self-referring loop software. In the end, so LangChain is much more robust for OpenAI. And this is because in the end, if you look at any type of statistics of which models are the most popular ones, what are companies and the community using, it is so that there was, for example, this story from A16C, this venture capitalist fund on how companies are using generative AI. And if I'm not mistaken, it came out that so companies, pretty much like 60% of them are working with OpenAI. So the large majority using OpenAI, plus on top, the large majority of those who are willing to pay for any type of service. So therefore, if you are a vendor such as LangChain, you think, so for what should I optimize my library, my software? Well, for offering a very nice OpenAI experience. But still, so the movement behind open source, open weight models, local models, it is very strong. There is a huge community behind, and it's just a matter of time until just the tools get better, until there is more compatibility for everything. There is nevertheless always this debate on where are we headed? Are we headed towards the future of the mainframe? So where will be something where we have these central computers, these providers, OpenAI, and then pretty much everyone is requesting so any type of answer from them. And will it be like this, or will it be as we have it now, where we have more and more powerful end devices? Where if you look at how powerful is an iPhone, it is orders of magnitude much more powerful than computers that came out a decade ago. So will it be this case of having super powerful end devices, or will it go the other way around and then we'll go to dumb devices? For example, these Rabbit smart assistant I was mentioning, where there is voice activity and so on. For the most part, the hardware is fairly basic. It is happening pretty much on the cloud. Everything is generating. Which way will we go is still up for debate. So I do believe that in the end, we're will be on getting better and better on edge computing, and as a result, the models will be running on our mobile phones. The models will be running locally, and that this idea that OpenAI has some sort of a monopoly is just temporary.
Think to bring it back to AI products, just because it's something we find personally very fascinating and still working in the space at the moment. Which products have you seen so far in the last year and a half that's come out that you think was the most interesting application of AI or has been the most effective in your eyes?
That's quite a tough question. Um, so, for example, products that I have liked. Um, the so Vercel, so like this code generator that Vercel has had, I find it so like a really well done. So this is I think like a sets the bar very high on what one can do. So with AI. Um, then the other thing that I find that is fascinating and fantastic is all type of IDEs for code generation, like Cursor and so on. So I do think, for example, how developers generate software. It is a space that will be in a lot of movement. It's already, but it's happening more and more in the tool set that they have access to and how they're working with code. Or it can really be that at some point it becomes, let's say, the idea of like prompt engineering becomes more like software engineering software. We are pretty much describing what we want. So create a function that is capable of doing this and that and so on. And then this is the code generated. So we're not really interacting with um, actual programming languages, but more some meta level that is pretty much natural language. So definitely any type of IDE such as a cursor, I like that. And also what here Versa is doing is another one. Another tool that I like a lot, so as an AI product is so for Anthropic, their prompt generator. So where indeed now we're talking of do we need prompt engineering? So how can we do better prompts and so on? And something that was yeah, that I'm surprised that nobody came out with this idea earlier is that Anthropic came out with just a tool where I can give a prompt and it will give me a much better prompt. And then, so to give you an example, if I get a prompt that is 3 lines of instructions, the end result from and this prompt generated for Anthropic will be 20 lines or more, very detailed of all steps that need to be done. And as a result, the quality of the output from this prompt generated prompt is much better than anything that I could have done as a human. So I'm really happy about how it and I use it a lot. Um, which one else also have found like interesting? Well, the other thing is now we with so here with ChatGPT and so GPT-4o that is multimodal. So I like it a lot because it really brought to anyone the ability to generate images and anything that is not text. So that yes, we had already for 2 years or longer, Midjourney, DALI, and so on. I mean, in fact, DALI has been available since I think 2021 or so, probably even earlier. So they've been ready for a while. But this was something that it was really reserved to just selected few. Even technical people will not know that there's Midjourney and you can use Midjourney for generating any type of images. And now anyone, any white collar employee at a large company can go and then just get into ChatGPT and ask, generate an image that does this and that, and therefore it has democratized completely. So I do think I'm more like a trend is about a democratization of services in AI, be it through better prompts, be it through generating things that are not text, and of course through making these tools available to people who are not experts in this space.
It's interesting because you touched on three kind of different products. One was a tool with Vercel that helped you build AI tools. And I agree, Vercel's product offering when it came to the AI landscape is brilliant. Another one was the prompt engineering tool from Anthropic. What you've also been touching on throughout most of the chat as well is how there's a type of product category in which you're basically bounding the user down to like a domain space in which that prompt in the back end is like guiding the user through to an experience, right? So you mentioned Anthropic, their prompt experience was you put in a really poor prompt and say like, I want to make a tweet generator, for example, and on the back end, it'll figure out the best way to give you a much more effective prompt that you can use down the line. I mean, I can see the same with other applications that are coming out in which they say, okay, this is the application to a therapist, for example. There's a prompt in the back end that's already done for you. So it seems like a lot of the value added for these products is actually just you designing an experience through the prompts with the model, as opposed to people fine tuning models today. I haven't seen many applications for that just yet in terms of a really successful product. Um, or foundation models you touched on with Midjourney as well, but that's obviously a lot less achievable for people like Shad and myself who are just young builders in the space.
Yes, absolutely. So, and this again, so the idea of why we need a new profession, such as like a AI product engineer, is that really the added value that we can generate, it is in not necessarily in the models. So where the models on one side, one is competing with organizations such as Meta, such as Mistral, and so on, that have budgets that are of hundreds of millions of dollars or more just to generate these models. As a small start or small developer, there is no way one can compete against that. It, however, how we can in the AI space do exciting things is exactly this topic on the application and on the democratization, because the reality is that we live in a complete bubble. So we think, hey, image generation already solved problems. So who needs now an application to generate images? And not true. So whenever I go and talk to people, so let's say people who are in the marketing department and so on, very often they have not even worked with ChatGPT. So let's say if you go to a room and say, raise hands, who has worked with ChatGPT or used it regularly? The large majority will say no, they have maybe heard of it, but they have not used it in their work. So just trying to make this available to a subset of users that you understand that you can really tailor something for their needs. There is so much opportunity there.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. I think focusing on the application side, designing these experiences for users, especially ones who have a complete lack of understanding of how to prompt engineer or the model itself, I think that's a brilliant approach of it. Okay, so just bring back quickly the AI product engineer because this is fascinating to me. If I was an 18, 19-year-old in computer science at the moment and I was watching this podcast, you know, what were the tangible next steps I could do to become an AI product engineer? What skills do I have to develop? What's the sophistication I have to have in machine learning understanding? Do I need to know a lot about data engineering? Do I need to know about front end design? How would I go about that? And do you have any resources for that as well?
So I would say the first thing is um, to learn how to program. So it will be like the first step. So choose a programming language that is a popular one. So it can be Python, it can be JavaScript, or whatever it is that you like. But just understand it and be able to do things with that. It will be like the very first step. Then once you know that, then it's about, for example, start using a framework that you like. So now Shab was mentioning here LangChain. So again, so I think like if you look in sources like Hacker News and some people will have a lot of criticism towards frameworks like LangChain. I take the other position and say, go and learn LangChain, because this will offer you so many opportunities professionally. This is what companies are looking for, that you will not get access to if you do not know it. Plus on top, by understanding LangChain, you also see what is the state of the art in the field. You see what are like the best practices in how people are structuring prompts, how people are developing the application, and so on. So it will open you so many doors and get you much faster to your objective, which is creating any type of application. Then, if I already know that and I want to go deeper, then I would start understanding how can I do more complex applications. I will start trying to learn, for example, how a RAG architecture works, how vector databases work. We didn't really touch on that, but core data structure in any type of generative application is the vector embedding. So then it means maybe I want to understand what makes a good vector embedding, how do I store them, how do I manage them, and so on. So to give an example, so I was interacting with some people from the community, and then one person was saying, um, I am doing now an application, so for my company, where I have these documents, and so it's a little bit of like chat with your data sort of application, and the documents, they are just a handful of them. So let's say so around 1,000, but still, when I convert them into vectors, into this vector embedding representation, it takes hundreds of megabytes in my database. Why is that? And turns out that among other things, the person was storing these documents or these vector embeddings as strings and not as any type of number representation in the database. As a result, it was much more inefficient. So understanding how to, on one side, um, so handle these, how to generate these vector embeddings, how to store them, how to work with them, and so on, is a whole, maybe even a whole discipline on its own. Then is the topic of how do I deploy these applications? So how we're discussing now on how can I make use of these prompts I'm collecting, um, and not only that I will store them, but also that later I will be able to use them to improve my model and so on. So there is also to learn. And then after that, then I can start thinking, hey, maybe I do want to start fine-tuning models. Maybe I see benefit in that, and then I want to so get exposed to these resources. And then it means, okay, I need to have access to the data that I will be collecting from the prompts. I need also to understand how I will be preparing the models to use it. I might want to, for example, think on other things of or activities that are still a bit more obscure for the general AI community, but are so very thriving, such as quantizing models, making the models smaller and so on. So that let's say I want to run a model in a smaller device, how can I do that and so on. So these are like all things that anyone can learn. But I would say really the first step is just first, of course, learn how to program, become a someone who knows how to do things with any type of programming. And now, especially more so with any type of ChatGPT assistant, it becomes even faster to do software development. But then after that, the very first step is just go and start playing with LangChain. That will be the thing. On how to learn that well. On one side, I saw through the Apple engineering community, I'm like offering some more and more content on this, on courses, guides, and so on how people can build AI applications. So people can go that. So to the AI product engineering community, aiproduct.engineer will be the address to go to. So that's where people can go and learn how to become AI product engineers.
Yeah, and all of these links will be in the description of wherever you're watching this, so YouTube or Spotify. So yeah, just find that link there. And then yeah, follow up question. So we've addressed the 18-year-olds. Now addressing the builders in the space, people trying to basically start startups in the AI space. Um, from my position at least, the way that I've seen it is we first started off with the wave of AI research. Then we've had everyone trying to sell the shovel. We've had all these LLM tooling companies. And now, in my opinion, I find that everyone's going, or at least now we're pushing more towards the SaaS user-centric companies. Do you agree with that? And what's your advice to someone who's trying to build in the space a startup?
Um, the What I was telling on building a startup is that they should treat AI just as another technology, just as, for example, I would say that, so if you think about how it was back in 2009, so in this period, 2009, 2013, and so on, where everyone needed to have a mobile strategy. And then it was the idea of being mobile first. And now we're talking about this idea of being AI first. But if we think about today, nobody's really talking about mobile, about being mobile first. It's just you say, hey, I need to be compatible with mobile devices. I need to think about that. Best practices have been established, but nobody's thinking, how can I build my company around a mobile device? This is not that. I'm thinking about rather what is it that I'm doing and how can I do in the best possible manner. And similar thing with AI. AI now is, we're talking about this because it is fairly new, but what will happen for sure is similar to this idea of mobile first software. Companies will not be thinking, how do I incorporate AI or not? It's just part of what you need, and then you will use it where it makes sense or not. But this will not be the core of your company. The core of the problem that you're solving. So treat AI as a technology, as an enabler, but not really as like the core of your product. Think instead, what is the problem that you're solving, and then see if AI makes sense or not.
Yeah, I think this is a conversation me and Alex had last week. Actually, it's as a product, do you advertise AI? Say this is an AI product, and does that actually get more user attention, or should the AI be completely abstracted away from the user and just a back end service that actually makes the product better?
Yeah.
And
So many people try and shove AI into every application and say this is AI product, whereas we're discussing, do we just pretend that it's magic and they don't really know what's happening in the background? They just get the benefit or the value from the product.
at the moment, it's a differentiator, and it makes sense to advertise it for also drawing like historic parallel. You can think about in the late 90s, everyone was calling their company .com. There was this .com and so on. And then at some point it was dropped, right? Because of people understood, hey, it is online, so I just have whatever it is, Microsoft.com. I don't need to call it on a commercial or my advertisement, Microsoft.com. People just know it will be the address. Similar with AI, at some point it will like understood. But right now that is early and that there's still clearly two categories of products. These legacy products that have no AI whatsoever inside and those that are having it. It makes a lot of sense to differentiate oneself. And also, I think as a startup, one can get all the advertisement that one can get. One is already in a position where one is deprived from resources. So therefore, if there is anything that can differentiate oneself from any type of competition that can grab attention, and this can be AI, then of course advertise AI as much as possible. The same we are AI first. But likely down the line, at some point, they will be removed from the messaging, and then you will not say we are an AI first CRM. You will say we are CRM.
That's a great answer. That's a really great answer. Over time, people won't really care anymore because it'll become the norm. Okay, so we'll end up wrapping up pretty quickly, but I have a friend of mine who's building an AI therapist app, and I just want to get your opinions on how we can kind of progress a bit further. He's starting off originally by creating a single prompt saying you are an AI therapist and please answer questions accordingly, like so. How would you practically go by creating the rest of the application? Because it's very weak. It tends to deviate off course a little bit. Does he start gathering examples from AI therapists, transcripts across YouTube or whatever, or does he start putting the app out there and immediately gathering evaluation, getting some feedback? Does he start creating synthetic data sets? Where do you go from there? Because there's so many options to improve the model. I think a lot of people don't really have a good understanding of a really solid product development lifecycle and a product development workflow. What recommendations do you have for this person?
It will come down to which resources this person has access to. For example, this person has access to the therapists and therapists are engaged in working the application. Then I will always default for getting access to these expert humans over anything else. This will be a much more higher qualitative feedback, not only for collecting data, but just on understanding what is it that they want. Maybe it's it that they want AI just in some parts of the process. Maybe it is that in the end comes out that a lot of the problems can be solved just through, let's say, hard-coded rules, and then so here drag and drop, click here and there, and that's it. And then AI just at the end some little piece of the puzzle. It can be that, but then definitely. So first assess which resources do I have to. If I have a budget, then for example, do I can pay to people, being the capacity of the therapist themselves, or maybe like some third-party mechanical turks of a person who is assessing so what my application is doing. If not, then am I technical enough to, for example, be working with other models that generate this data and so on, and doing this synthetic data, and so etc. So first assessment of where do I stand, what do I have to do, and then also it comes down to which application am I building. So what was like my vision of the application. So because also that if I want to do something, let's say like a complete therapist that it will be completely generated, it's very different to saying I'm just building a let's say like a summary of a patient's diagnostic that will be sent per email. And this will completely change of how we should proceed. So the person should just understand what the person wants to do really in the end as the vision for the company. And then also understand right now what do I have access to.
Sure. Yeah, and I was interested you mentioned the experts. Is the experts' opinion so they can evaluate the responses from the model, or is it to help guide the prompt engineering, or is it to help create the data, or is it a combination of all three?
I would say it's a question of all three. So in the end, so if this is an application for therapists or that for patients who interact with therapy and so on, getting access, for example, here to the therapist, providing their feedback and saying, hey, like no patient would provide this input, or I will never say that to a patient and so on, is paramount. And then not only that, but also if the therapist can interact with the application and then generate prompts, then likely this prompt will be of very high quality and very relevant for anything that so here this person is trying to build.
I just wanted to ask, like, long term, how scalable do you think is it to keep a human in the loop? Because from what I'm seeing, at least when we discuss, for example, multi-agent collaboration for app creation, for example, it'll be pretty hard to keep a human there to basically evaluate how well code is being written because they don't have the same ability to read through lots and lots and lots of code the same way an LLM does. So how scalable is it and how future proof is it to actually keep a human in the loop?
I rather will see that this is the way to go, because there are also like in studies that um, synthetic data over time is not good for a model. So the quality of a model, if only the only thing that we're using is always giving synthetic data or synthetic data or synthetic data, the quality of a model drops and becomes unusable in a sense. And this might start to happen in that if we think just of how all these models are trained and how data is collected, for the most part, we have already exhausted all sources that we had available from the public internet. So we have already, Google had already crawled the whole internet, the OpenAI, etc. There were these rumors, for example, that OpenAI for its latest model, this Sora for video generation, was pretty much scraping YouTube. And there are also like rumors in for this latest model GPT-4o that OpenAI was pretty much um, using YouTube videos converted into transcripts to use these to train their models. And here we're seeing that really companies are finding the limits of which data sources are available in large quantity that are also human. And therefore, as a, let's say like startup, as a startup who's trying to build a product, I will definitely need access to this human data. And this will also will give me an edge. This is also what makes it valuable. So this type of internal data is only accessible in companies and so on, because it's not exposed to, have never been seen by a model. So I do think that, although it is so of course logistically complicated to organize how we can have these humans evaluating and so on, in order to build high quality products, high quality models, it will be essential to have access to unique data that is generated by humans and not by machines.
During the pod, Rod has enlightened us and touched on his opinions on AI products, a brand new role of the AI product engineer, and he's also touched on things like data quality, and he's given advice to 18-year-olds wanting to get into the space, as well as builders currently in the space wanting to build AI products. So thank you very much, Rod, for coming on the pod. Be sure to check out the links in the description to find out more about him.